of you for being here. No, thank you, Blake. Thank you all so much for being here today and joining us for this conversation on meaning and just an exploration of what that looks like for people living with ALS. So with that, you just heard the recording go off. So we are recording today's session. If you would prefer to stay anonymous in your participation today, you can turn your video off, and you can also private message Blake or Mackenzie, who I'll introduce here in a bit, to ask your questions, and we'll make sure to get to those. Just a quick overview on I AM ALS. We are a patient-centric movement revolutionizing how to end disease. We provide critical support and resources to people who are impacted by ALS, and that includes people living with ALS, caregivers, and their loved ones. We also empower advocates to raise awareness and lead the movement against ALS in driving the development of cures. And specifically, what are we doing here today? What is an Ask Me Anything ALS? AMAs are not just a fun social media trend, but it is also an idea born out of the I AM ALS community, where ALS advocates living with and impacted by ALS come together to answer questions from a group of people who are interested in the topic. So today's topic, as I mentioned, sorry about that. And if you are not speaking, mute yourself. So today's topic, as I mentioned, is finding meaning and just exploring what that looks like for everybody. So just a couple of housekeeping things. We encourage you to use the chat feature to ask a question, or the raise a hand feature to participate in today's discussion and share your own experience or answer to a question. We will track the questions that are submitted in chat to ensure that we are able to get to as many as we can during today's event. If we don't get to your question during the event itself, we will be sure to follow up with you and make sure that we are still getting you some information. As I mentioned earlier, if you wish to remain anonymous when asking a question, you can send the question directly to Blake or to Mackenzie, who are both on the community support team at I AM ALS. And then to raise your hand for the raise your hand feature, click on the reactions icon and then click raise your hand. Please mute yourself when not speaking, as this will allow the discussion to flow without interruptions or background noise. So with that, I'm going to introduce each of our incredible panelists for today, and starting with Shelley. Shelley is a veteran and has been living with ALS for 9.5 years. She was a public school administrator when diagnosed at age 47. She leads the I AM ALS Veterans team and is a member of the Legislative Affairs team. She's published 2 novels and currently writing her 3rd. Shelley lives in North Carolina with her husband, Steve, and her daughter's family. Watching her 5 grandchildren learn and grow is her greatest source of joy. Thank you so much, Shelley, for being here. Our next incredible panelist is Juan. Juan Reyes is an ardent advocate for those suffering from ALS, having been diagnosed October of 2015. Juan served 21 years in the United States Air Force as an independent duty medical technician and clinic superintendent. As a patient mentor, Juan aids newly diagnosed patients navigate this devastating diagnosis. Juan actively serves as a patient advocate and patient board member with various organizations, both locally and nationally. Juan resides with his wife and 4 children in Castroville, Texas. Thank you for being here, Juan, and a part of this panel. Our next amazing panelist is Justin. Justin was diagnosed with sporadic limb onset ALS on December 3rd, 2020, at the age of 39. He lives in Lawrenceville, Georgia, with his wife, Suzanne, of 21 years, and they have 3 children together, Emily, Laurel, and Gabe. Prior to retiring in May of 2021, Justin was a human resources professional. Justin recently joined the community review team at I AM ALS, and he loves attending the support group for people living with ALS each Tuesday. Justin loves going to concerts with his wife, watching college football, go Dogs, and Major League Baseball, go Braves, and reading. Thank you, Justin, for being here on this panel. And last, but so far from least, our one more incredible panelist, Chanel. Chanel lives in Chester, Virginia, with her high school sweetheart, Lamont, and they have 2 young adult daughters, Angel and Deja. Chanel was diagnosed with ALS at the age of 38. She has been thriving with ALS for 14 years. She still works full-time with the Virginia State Corporation Commission as a deputy comptroller. Chanel is a member of the Many Shades of ALS team and a strong ALS advocate in her local community. Thank you, Chanel, for being here and a part of this panel. Gosh, what an incredible group of panelists we have today for this discussion. Well, with that, before we move on and dive straight into the conversation, I do want to pass this to Mackenzie, an ALS support specialist at I AM ALS, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me. My name is Mackenzie, and I am an ALS support specialist with I AM ALS. I wanted to share a little bit about our support team. The support team works to support individuals who've been impacted by ALS with their emotional or practical needs. This includes providing and facilitating access to information involving understanding ALS and care options, clinical trials, insurance and legal assistance, assistive devices and equipment needs, and any other sort of practical need you can think of. If you have any ALS related needs that we can't directly assist with, we do our best to connect you with a person or an organization that can assist you. We know that ALS can feel overwhelming to navigate and to talk about, especially the larger decisions and planning that comes with it. So I'm here today to provide emotional support and resources as our wonderful panelists continue the discussion on finding meaning. Please know that anyone joining this call can reach out to me privately at any time using the Zoom chat feature. Myself and the rest of the support team can be reached at gethelp@iamals.org if you're wanting to email us. And you may also request support through a link on our webpage, which I'll put in the chat momentarily. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mackenzie. And with that, let's dive right in. So our first question for our amazing panelists is, there is an arc to finding meaning. It doesn't just happen overnight. And I'm curious to hear from each of you, what are some of the pinpoints in that arc for you from the time you were diagnosed with ALS to finding meaning and a sense of purpose again?
I'll go ahead and go. So for me, it took a while for me to really kind of wrap my head around, the diagnosis I'd received. I'd always been very active, always been fairly healthy, and so to receive that, essentially a terminal diagnosis, it was kind of a hard pill to swallow. And for me personally, and when it comes to finding meaning and finding purpose, I'm the kind of individual who I had found meaning. I'd put a lot of value and in my purpose and in my meaning and a lot of my accomplishments. Whether that was getting degrees, whether it was my accomplishments at work. It was always stuff that I could do, which is where I found my meaning. But I quickly started realizing, as the progression took on, that, I'm more, than just what I do. And that was a hard transition. mentally, at least for me, is, I kind of think like, we're human beings, not human doings. And so I kind of like play that in my mind sometimes, that in just me being me, I have value. There is value to my family, even though I may not be able to do the things that I once were able to do with them or with my friends. But just finding, and for me, it's been, it's almost one of those things that I have to work on daily, finding meaning and finding purpose. Because as we all know, ALS is one of those things that it doesn't just affect our physical bodies, but it also affects our mental state and our emotions, which can be very, very tough. And so it's, for me, I've had to make the choice to daily say, I'm going to find purpose, I'm going to find meaning in who I am, by just me being me. And I'm not always great at that. I don't always succeed at that. But it's something that I realized it's a daily choice for me. So that's kind of the arc for me, I think.
At the age of 38. At the age of 38, I was diagnosed. I had a husband and 2 daughters, 8 and 7. I was devastated, and I experienced every single emotion, from anger, grief, to sadness. Because my girls were young, I knew I had to get it together, at least for them and my husband. I guess you can say, I was faking it until I could make it, for my girls. But faking strength and perseverance for my family eventually changed to wanting it for myself. It was easier in the beginning, when my only disruption was a cane and a leg brace. But let's fact forward and add a wheelchair, feeding tube, communication device, trach, and vent. What now? Again, a myriad of emotions. I decided if I had all this apparatus to keep me alive, I'm going to live. I must change my mindset and stop concentrating on my losses but focus on what I can do. I find meaning and purpose in several ways. First and foremost, I lean on my faith. That helps me to maintain a positive outlook. I have decided I will not let ILS define me. I am more than enough. I keep active in my family and friends' lives, continue to travel, participate in my sorority activities, advocate for ILS, serve as the pastor's wife at my church, and I continue to work. Basically, I keep my mind busy even though my body may be dormant. It has been a transition and every day isn't perfect, but I make a choice to be grateful and make the most of every day I have.
Thank you, Justin and Chanel.
I'll go next. With me, it became very evident that I had the ability to engage in the ALS community more than I was initially willing to. And that was because I had the opportunity to meet others that were lending their voice to the ALS fight. I was inspired by their desire to help the community at large. One of those individuals was Shelley, who is here on the panel. I had the opportunity to meet her in 2016 at a conference in DC, and she blew me away with her energy and attitude of never giving up. And so with that, I decided that I have an opportunity to make a difference, no matter what it is that I have to offer. I have spent my entire professional career in the service of others as a military person, and my last position was with the Salvation Army, helping the community here in our city. And believe it or not, those that know me well, I am a lifelong introvert, and ILS stripped me of my fears of putting myself out there. And so with that, I do. And I find a lot of satisfaction in being able to connect with others and being able to help them in whatever way, small or large, by just connecting with them and helping them along their journey. It gives me great joy and fulfillment to do so. Thank you.
It's a process. And it's not like I've arrived. I'm a work in progress. I find being a part of something bigger than myself is important to my quality of life and sense of purpose. I had to reach out and keep trying until I found my place. I realize this isn't an I AM ALS commercial, but my mental health would be in the toilet if I didn't participate in this community. I need to feel productive. I need to be connected to others. An internet connection and my eye gaze computer are the only tools required. I've also been on a journey to find peace, the kind of peace that comes from the marrow of my bone. Peace that surpasses understanding. It's much more than happiness derived from circumstances. Isn't that what we all yearn for? That is something outside of my ALS diagnosis. I find that peace by spending most of my energy staying in the present moment. I don't live in the past, or hang on to anything from my past. All that mess has been released. I also don't worry about the future. When I live in the present, I have peace.
Thank you, Shelley. I'm going to quick read from the chat, and just to let you all know, if you ask a question in the chat, we will address that question. We'll add it to our list for the panelists, but I'm going to read a few comments that have shown up. Christine wrote, 100, relate to you, Justin. My self-worth was based on my achievements. Teresa said, I have C9ORF72 mutation. I have just about lost my speech. I am terrified of Alzheimer's and the outlook for my future. I do try to focus on all I can do. And thanks for sharing that, Teresa. And Nate, you said ALS can make us realize those petty little fears are easy to overcome.
Thank you, Mackenzie. And thank you, Juan and Shelley, also for sharing. Gosh, I feel like this panel might be a great way for us to find things to put on Post-its to remind ourselves of every day, just with everything that you all have shared. Justin, I really loved how you said we are human beings, not human doings. I have never thought of that way, and I just really love that and feel like that needs to go on a t-shirt. Chanel, I loved hearing from you that I am more than enough, right? That reminder of each of us is more than enough. And that was really beautiful and just wonderful to help ground us for this conversation today. So thank you. And Juan, I loved that you were able to shift how you find meaning in something that you have always found meaning in doing, which is living a life of service to others. And for a long time, that looked like military service. And now that shifts into being an advocate and helping others navigate ALS. So that was just really beautiful. And just, it's sort of looking back at, no, I am still who I am. I just find meaning in doing this in a different way. So thank you for sharing that. And Shelley, thank you for reminding all of us that we are not perfect and that we will always be a work in progress. I think that is just so important for all of us to remember and keep in mind and keep in our hearts too. So thank you. Juan, I am curious, a little while ago, maybe a couple of months ago, you so graciously shared in a prior Facebook post related to this topic that the fog can cloud the inner vision of ourselves and conversely how others see us. Can you share a little bit more about how you have been able to see past that fog?
I'd love to, but first of all, I'd like to say that if I could snap my fingers, I would have been snapping at all the other panelists' comments. They're on point. Thank you. As far as the fog of ALS is concerned, we tend to focus on the diagnosis and what it is going to entail. And we should do that because it is heartbreaking. It is life altering. And we need to allow ourselves to experience all the emotions that come along with such a diagnosis. And often it is stated that it is a death sentence. I turned my mindset around and thought of it more of as a slap on the head by the universe to really live, to express myself and share my inner being. And I do that by sharing on social media often and transparently, no matter how painful the experience is. There's meaning and value in both positivity and negative experiences. We can all learn from each other. Coming through that fog is a process, and there are many that can't find their way out. But I like to say and remind others that there are two forms of surrendering, and I by no means mean surrendering to ALS as a person living with it, but I remind others to surrender to the love and support that is being offered by those around them, often because we are creatures of habit and must control all aspects of our life. It is difficult to relinquish that control. Although physically incapable of controlling our body, we can only control our mind and our thoughts. And we must surrender to the love and support being offered by our families, caregivers, and those that are offering their assistance.
Thank you for sharing that one. And I really appreciate you grounding us with, it's important to feel all of the emotions, right? You aren't diagnosed with ALS and then the next morning you wake up and you're like, okay, how do I find meaning in this? It's really giving your space time to feel that sense of heartbreak, to feel that sense of grief. I think, Chanel, you said it so beautifully earlier. You experienced like all of the emotions, right? From anger to sadness and beyond. So giving yourself space and time to experience all of that, and then to sort of like come through that fog. So I really appreciate how you shared that one. Thank you. Another question for y'all. Many people may struggle with truly finding meaning if they fall into the trap of toxic positivity sometimes, which, if you're not familiar with toxic positivity, it's sort of like forcing yourself to only think positively and not allowing yourself the space to, as we were just talking about, to really feel what you're feeling. So to allow yourself the space to feel that sense of heartbreak, that sense of anger or grief, and sort of ignoring all of that. So if folks fall into this and not acknowledging and honoring the multiple conflicting emotions that they may be experiencing. So a two-part question here. Did you struggle with this, of falling into the trap of toxic positivity? And if yes, how did you cope with it? And two, did you have any support with coping with this, and what did it look like? And maybe we can start with Chanel.
Yes, I had multiple conflicting emotions and I still have them. Even though I make the choice to live a meaningful life, I don't live in denial. I know that I have insurmountable health challenge. I cope with those struggles by not concentrating on who I was, but I focus on who I am becoming. Don't get me wrong, I cherish my memories and reminiscing can be both therapeutic and sometimes painful. When those emotions of loss and grief flood, I acknowledge them, cry, or write it out, and keep on moving. I don't view my positivity as toxic. I don't live in a false sense of reality, nor do I proclaim to be a superwoman. I embrace that I must make a choice each day to either move ahead or get stuck in my losses. I also strongly believe in getting mental health support. We are carrying a heavy load and there is nothing wrong with saying, I'm not okay, I need help. Use support groups, mental health professionals, family and friends, and other resources to have a healthy and fulfilling emotional state.
I knew early on that I couldn't avoid the hard feelings. Grief is a constant in ALS. As if the physical losses aren't enough, we also mourn losing a career, recreation, hobbies, relationships, and on and on. I had to find a healthy way to process all of the pain. A typical process for me includes a complete and total snot-faced ugly cry. The key for me is to return to gratitude as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Chanel and Shelley. Juan and Justin, would you like to add there?
Sure. Like Chanel said, like I do still experience the gamut of emotions. I've never, since my diagnosis, I don't think I've had a case of toxic positivity. I think if we're all honest, ALS sucks, and receiving an ALS diagnosis sucks. So I've never been overly positive, but I did decide early on that you know, I'm going to allow myself to feel all of the emotions, but I'm not going to, you know, allow myself to stay in those, what we call quote unquote bad emotions of sadness, depression, anger. Because I knew that if I tried to stay overly positive and then ignore those other emotions that we don't want to feel or that we're told we're not supposed to feel, it's going to come out some way, somehow. And it's going to affect the relationships that we have with our family, with our friends. And I didn't want that to dictate how I lived the rest of my days, whether that was 2 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, however long. And so sitting with those emotions, allowing yourself to feel them, but allowing yourself not to stay there. For me, that's been key. And even I read a book by Michael J. Fox early on after my diagnosis. He said Parkinson's for I think about 30 years. And one of the things that he said, and I'm always quick to share this with people, but it stuck with me, is that you know, with gratitude, optimism becomes sustainable. And I think everybody looks at Michael J. Fox as this overly positive guy, but when you look into his memoirs, he has rough days like we all do when you receive some sort of diagnosis. But that one quote, you know, gratitude really stuck with me. So yeah, not every day's great, but I'm thankful for every day that I wake up. Some days are, you know, and sometimes it's weeks that I feel like I'm just in this rut. But I've come to terms and I've said, hey, that's okay, because I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to allow myself to feel this and then let it go. And like Chanel said as well, like mental health is important. Talking to somebody, whether it's a mental health professional or with, you know, a friend, a spouse, even a support group. I have found so much just help and kind of relief through support groups, through the I AM ALS support group, even through a local ALS association chapter support group. Even if I don't speak or say anything during that group, it still just edifies me as a person, talking to other individuals. So yeah.
I'll add to that in the second and third, the comment regarding gratitude. I'm thankful every day for every action that assists me in maintaining a good quality of life. I never go without saying thank you for any assistance or action that is rendered to me in order to help me maintain my life. And that goes to professionals and the medical team also. I'm grateful for every day, and I remind others that every day is a gift. The process of coming to terms with ALS is different for everyone. And that includes our families and friends. And so I don't discourage them from showing their emotions and anger and frustration when they're around me, because by letting them express their grief, they're helping me cope with mine. We can't all be stoic all the time. It's detrimental to hold in such energy for too long. and that includes those that's around us. And so we're all mourning the life that we were planning because we don't walk alone in our lives.
Thanks so much to all of you for answering that question and sharing so vulnerably. Stephen Cronin in the chat said, if anyone has seen a great movie called Dangerous Minds, there is a scene where they talk about choice. We all have a choice. It is the greatest gift we have been given. I made a choice. I was not going silent into the night. I would rage against the dying light. That is the extent of my poetry. Nate wrote, such high-level self-awareness, Justin. And Eric M said, I think I'm with you, Justin. I'm not over joyful, but more realistic.
Thank you, Mackenzie. And thank you to all of you, as Mackenzie said, for just sharing so openly and vulnerably. I really appreciated, Chanel, how you were talking about one, how you need to give yourself space to feel or just reminisce about memories. And if that comes up, just, spend time with them. And, it can be a little painful or very painful, depending on the memory. But still just honoring that space. And then I think both you and Justin also shared just the importance of mental health support. And Shelley, you had shared this previously as well, that sense of connection, right? Reaching out to others and really feeling like you have a community, whether that's through support groups, or whether that's through a counselor or one-on-one support, whatever that looked like. So I think that was something that was really valuable in you sharing that. Shelley, I loved how you emphasized that you knew early on that you could not avoid the hard emotions. And it sounds like that was a theme with you, Justin and Juan as well, of just knowing very early, like, this is going to come up and I can't avoid this. And I need to give myself space to honor all of this. So that was great. And also how you talked about how you had to figure out how to process it, right? So when the anger comes up, well, what do I do with this anger? Or when the sadness comes up, what do I do with this sense of sadness? And whatever that looked like for each person, but for Shelley, that specifically, I think, as in your words, was the snot-faced ugly cry, and making sure that you got a real good one of those in, and then coming back to gratitude, and that seems to work as your process. So thank you for sharing about that. And Juan, I loved how you shared, and I think there's a question at some point that also kind of relates to this, of how we are all mourning, and despite that, allowing space for others to share their emotions also helps you take the space to share yours. So I think that was really wonderful to hear as well. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so another part of this conversation is just around meaningful contribution, right? All of you have shared different versions of what your day looks like, or what your how you go about finding meaning in your life today, and involvement in advocacy or in work, etc. So just recognizing that meaningful contribution can really vary greatly from person to person and from day to day. How do you meet yourself where you're at each day? Because that's another thing that came up, is that it's a choice, right? Each day to find meaning. And what are some examples of your range?
I've come to accept that I am physically unable to contribute to my household or play with my grandkids. It's been a gradual process and still hurts sometimes. I'm especially sad when a different grandma figure bakes or does crafts with them. But, after 10 seconds of feeling sorry for myself, I change my perspective to gratitude. I'm thankful that the grandkids get to do something fun. I enjoy affirming and encouraging others. It brings me joy to remind my daughter that she is a great mom and has unique qualities to offer the world. I find it's easier to stay present when I focus on others and not myself or my limitations. Advocacy work is another way I make a meaningful contribution. I want to be a part of something that is bigger than myself.
Add to that, and that I find that sharing my knowledge and experience with my family and children helps me find my self-worth as a member of the family and being able to contribute, like Shelley mentioned, physical abilities are no longer a part of what I can offer, but I have life experience. I love teaching my kids how to cook. I used to be the cook in the house. I like to direct them on how to do DIY projects around the house. As I used to be the one that would do that. So there's value in what we have in our head, although we don't have the physical ability to do much, we can still contribute. And even beyond the family dynamic with our friends, with the community, by lending our talents and energy, we can make a difference with others.
For me, I look at kind of just piggybacking off of what Shelley and Juan said. My physical abilities are becoming less and less. I'm becoming more dependent upon my wife for all hygiene and all that stuff. But what I try to keep in mind is, okay, well, what can I still do to be helpful to her? Well, I still have my voice, and I can talk on the phone, and she absolutely hates calling, if we need a plumber to come out, or if we need, I don't know why she just doesn't like it. So it's like, hey, I can still do that. So I'll, while she's working, I can call the plumber, or call the, maintenance guy, or, whatever we're needing done. I can make those phone calls, or I can, make doctor's appointments or dentist appointments for the kids. And I can still do the bills, so I look and see, well, yes, I've lost the ability to do that, but what can I still do in order for me to provide a meaningful contribution to my wife? I wish I could do more, but hey, I can't. So, and then also for me, I guess kind of personally, it's just, how can I give back to others? And so trying to, getting plugged in as much as possible has helped me, and trying to help others, and just even reaching out to friends. No, maybe they're not going through what I'm going through, but they're still going through some crap in their lives too at times. So reaching out and asking, hey man, how's it going with this, or how's it going with that? Just trying to be more aware of others, being more other-centric, I think, is key. And it takes the, when we're more other-centric, it takes the limelight or the spotlight off of our problems, and I think it can also help us to get out of that kind of that mindset of woe is me at times, when we look at how can we still contribute and help others.
I give myself grace. If my devoted husband can continue to get me up daily, and I accomplish anything, It was a good day. I think we are our worst critics and sometimes establish unrealistic expectations for ourselves, leading to disappointment. If I can offer my young adult daughters any wisdom or just make them laugh, or if I can order my husband groceries and meals, or if I can do any advocacy work, or if I can complete a project at work, or if I can go out and let others see me with all my stuff, I made a difference and it's a lovely day. I have learned not to compare myself to others. Find what makes you feel meaningful and valued and do you. The thing to remember is, you are enough, you are human, and you make a difference. Find your niche and do what brings you joy.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing that. I'm going to read from the chat. Ian wrote, I don't think fear has been mentioned. Fear seems a barrier to living with meaning. And Sharon Williamson wrote, I am a caregiver in 1.5 years of diagnosis with my partner. I am so deep in the emotion right now. I will now remember to come back to gratitude. That has definitely been lost. Thank you, all of you beautiful beings.
Thank you, Mackenzie. And thank you all for your really wonderful responses to that question. And Chanel, I think you wrapped us up so beautifully with that question of just sharing that we are all enough and that we are human and that we make a difference. So thank you for sharing that. I want to ask some of the questions that we received during the registration process from people who may be here today. And the first question is for Justin, Chanel, and Juan. And it is, what can I do to help my employer understand that I am still able to work and can add value at my job?
I'll take
I'm
this.
currently still working 40 hours a week. I'm currently still working 40 hours a week. I work with wonderful people, enjoy my job, and get great satisfaction from contributing to the organization. I let my job know, from the beginning, what was happening to me. Once I diagnosed, I explained that I would work until I felt I needed to stop. I expressed that I didn't want to be treated with pity. I set the expectations from the beginning. As things progressed, I asked for what I needed. In 2012, I had an emergency trach and was vented. My employee approached me with the option to continue working remotely. I agreed and I'm still working now. I let them know what I needed, such as my work computer modified to include eye gaze and a communication device. They indicated that whatever I needed, they would provide. They never view me as invaluable because I set the expectations from the beginning, and I can still perform my job duties. They also understand that when I decide I no longer can or want to work, I will make the necessary transition. Honesty and communication are crucial for a successful working relationship.
Thank you, Chanel. That was really helpful advice. Juan?
I want to echo what Chanel said about communication and expectations. There are plenty of accommodations that can and should be established or offered if possible. I quit working because it was no longer safe for me to do so, and the work that I did was not possible remotely. And so I made the choice to move on. Individuals that are in this position can communicate with their leadership and clearly state their needs and share the progression that is going to happen. You can also request that your OT, if possible, visit the job site and make recommendations on what devices and accommodations can be offered to be able to continue working. Another possibility, as Chanel is demonstrating and Shelley has proven to do so well, is using your eye gaze, the computer that you control with your eyes, to be able to continue the work. There's plenty of work that can be computer-based, including using software that's proprietary to the organization. Everything is possible with the eye gaze.
Yeah, I think, like the key is communication with your boss or your supervisor. For me, I decided after my diagnosis, I worked for about another 5 or 6 months. And from the very beginning, I was open with my boss about what was going on. And luckily for me, I had a great relationship with my boss. I know not everybody has that. I've had bad bosses in the past that I probably would have been hesitant or perhaps a little afraid to go and have that type of conversation with, not knowing how he or she would react. But I had a great relationship with my boss. And so we talked from the very beginning, hey, I don't know how long I'm going to work. He said, okay, well, you keep me informed as far as what you want to do and when you want to do it. And we came up with a plan. We talked along the way, and I stopped working in May of 2021. And even though I probably could have worked for the remainder of the year, I decided what I wanted to do is, because I wasn't sure how this disease was going to progress for me, I wanted to use my time to do what I wanted to do with my family, do some traveling, hang out some more with friends while I could still drive myself. And for me, I don't regret that. So, if, I would say if you are hesitant for any reason, to tell your supervisor, to have that conversation with him or her, you could always get human resources involved. Just simply because I hope I'm not reading too much into the question that your boss is not wanting you to work anymore or trying to push you out, but there are protections, that is law to protect your job. And that's just me speaking as a former human resource professional. So I guess it's still a little bit in me, even though I've been out of the profession for about a year and a half. But yeah, just open conversation is important in navigating what you're wanting to do about work.
Thank you all for that. I'm just going to chat. Teresa shared, I was told I could not be accommodated at work. I even reached out to ADA. And it sounds like there may be some additional options there to explore, Teresa. And Shelley, in response to Ian's question earlier about fear, said, Ian, you're right. Fear can be paralyzing. I process fear along with other emotions. I can't do that alone. I needed help. I also choose daily to not live in fear. It doesn't serve me. And Ian said, thank you, Shelley. And Shelley said, Teresa, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I want to switch to a question that we received in chat just a little bit ago from a caregiver who was asking, what is the best advice you can give me struggling with helping my loved one in palliative care? What does he need most from me being 100% vent dependent and has accelerated decline in a year?
I'll jump in on this one. That's a very difficult question, given that every person is unique with their needs. If possible, a conversation with discussing the desires and needs. It's a tough one. Just being present and offering comfort where you can, and opportunities to engage by offering activities that they can be included in, either in person or remotely. Anything to keep them engaged and their minds active is what I can offer.
Thank you, Juan. And I will also emphasize Juan's point of this is a really hard question because each person is just so different. I would strongly encourage an open and honest conversation with your loved one about what it is that they need. And sort of your expectations as well as their expectations, combined with your ability to meet those expectations, is going to be extremely important to making sure that what is really important to them and what they value is what is driving this conversation and their care. And then Shelley in chat said, ask the person living with ALS what they want, what they need and want socially and emotionally. We do have a helpful checklist with some questions to get started on a conversation about values, because sometimes it can feel so vague to talk about. Oh, what do you mean? What are my values? Where do I even start with thinking about what my values are? So we can share that checklist with everyone as well. All right, getting back to some of our questions from registration. Shelley, this question is for you. And the question is, after receiving my diagnosis, I felt isolated and throughout my progression have isolated myself for fear of being a burden on others. What are some ways I can stay engaged in my family and community?
Have you ever helped someone in need? It feels pretty good, right? I found that I was selfishly denying that joy to other people by not wanting help from anyone. Now, the truth is, I need lots of help. There's no denying it. So rather than viewing myself as a burden, I am a big opportunity for others to feel good about helping me.
What a great reframe. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Shelley. And this can feel tricky, but I want to go back to the values checklist or just the conversation, but really thinking about what your personal values are and what you find joy and meaning in can also be really helpful to think about. So that when you are trying to engage with the people around you, you can say, hey, would you like to go do X with me? Would you like to watch a movie with me? Or would you like to come to this advocacy event with me? So really thinking about what do you enjoy that they may want to be a part of as well. I hope that was helpful. Another question from chat today. Thank you all for this sharing. you all talked in different ways about the importance of being and staying in the present versus the past or future. How do you help your loved ones do that too? Or maybe that is not entirely your job to do.
That's not like your responsibility. I think giving them space to have those feelings, and to, because we need that space as well. We've talked about that. We talked about that earlier. So just as we need that space to feel those feelings, so does our family, and giving them permission, I think is key. When I received my diagnosis, and then a few days later, my wife and I, we sat down our kids to tell them about it. One of the things that I told them is, hey, you're probably going to see that I have some bad days and then I have some good days. I said, I'm giving you permission for that as well. That you're going to have days when you're sad or when you're angry, and that's okay. But I encouraged myself, I encouraged them, don't stay there. Don't stay in that place. It's not going to be healthy. But I can't make them do that. But I think giving them permission and giving them that space is enough. And that's all we can do.
Thank you for that, Justin. That was really helpful. I have a follow-up question, and this is for you or for any of our panelists. We've talked a lot about giving space, and what does that look like? And how do you do that?
I think for me personally, my wife is my primary caregiver. And there are days when she is a lot nicer to me than other days. And so giving her grace, Chanel said having grace for ourselves, but then also having grace for our caregivers, or, those who are helping us out for the day or whatever. That's what I found, is that this is a lot on my wife as well, as much as it is me, in a different way, obviously. But I have to give her space to have a bad day, to have a time when maybe her fuse is maybe a little bit shorter. Maybe she's a little bit, she's short with me. I can't get my feelings easily hurt, and think, well, she doesn't love me anymore, or she's mad, but giving her grace to have those feelings as well, has been my experience. And I haven't realized that overnight. It comes with making mistakes and kind of a trial and error thing. Like with ALS, it's continually progressing. And I think physically we're progressing, but also with that progression comes these other new mental and emotional challenges, I believe, as well. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Justin. This next question is a little related to that. Before we move on, I want to go to chat really quickly. Thank you, Mackenzie, for sharing the link to the values checklist. Chanel in chat said, agree with Justin, all days are not perfect, have patience. And Sharon said, nailed it, Justin. And somewhat related to this topic is our next question, which is, what do we do when you have accepted your life with ALS, but the people around you have not accepted that? Juan, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, I've actually dealt with that personally, and has been mentioned multiple times. It's not our responsibility to help them accept who we are becoming. It is up to them. But again, as been mentioned before, giving them their space to do so. I have two brothers that find it very difficult to see me in my condition, and they tend to shy away from visiting. I don't guilt them for not doing so. I accept that their feelings and fears are valid, and all I can do is live my life as best I can. And if they ever come to terms with it, I will receive them with open arms, metaphorically. And the key there is being patient and allowing others, as has been said before, to grieve in their own way.
Thank you, Juan. What do you think about encouraging folks who are having a harder time with accepting a loved one's diagnosis to also connect with other caregivers of someone living with ALS or joining a support group, etc.? Is that helpful, or could that be overwhelming, or is it both? Sorry, that question was for all of you panelists.
It has the potential to be both. Every person comes to terms, whether living with ALS or experiencing it through a loved one, on their own time. The ALS clock, as it is referred to, does not apply just to the patient, but those around us. And those opportunities can be offered, and if they're accepted, then the individual can decide on their own. My family and I actually feared engaging with others with ALS that was more advanced. We simply didn't want to see ourselves or our future progress. And so when we finally engaged with others, we discovered that there was strength in numbers and being open about our fears and concerns.
Yeah, I think it can be beneficial to recommend, a support group for your caregiver. But again, like Juan said, that has to be the decision that they make. Can't force them to attend. I can't force them to maybe read this book or this article, but I can recommend things. But that has to be a decision that they make. And even if I could kind of go back to the previous question about when others are struggling to kind of accept our diagnosis when we have, I think another key is we have to learn to set boundaries for ourselves, that there may be some people who just never accept it. And being around them can be somewhat toxic with perhaps their negative thoughts or their insensitive comments. So there may come a time where we have to set certain boundaries with certain people. And that's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. But at the same time, we have to, in order to kind of keep in that mindset of finding meaning and purpose, unfortunately, sometimes setting those harder boundaries may be necessary.
Thank you, Justin. And I am over here clapping at that response because setting boundaries, gosh, that is so, so important to maintaining healthy relationships and also protecting yourself, right? You want to be choosy about the energy and the people that you let around you. So thank you for that. All right, another question from chat from earlier today. Thank you all for being so honest about the downtimes as well as how you deal with them. How and where did you find a counselor who knows about ALS and can help you navigate your ongoing anxieties and fears?
My first recommendation would be to reach out to your social worker at your ALS clinic. I've reached out to mine before asking for any sort of recommendations that she may know of counselors who, kind of maybe deal maybe with ALS specifically, or maybe with end of life type stuff. And she was able to send me a list of counselors to kind of look into and give a call or whatnot. So that's what I would recommend.
Thank you, Justin. Sometimes your local ALS Association chapter may also have some recommendations for counselors in the area. And if you need help with that, you can always reach out to our ALS support team and we can help you with that as well. All right, our next question, also from chat. Thank you all for this wonderful workshop. Before diagnosis, I was a researcher in another field. I've considered getting involved in ALS research or advocacy, but I'm afraid of getting overwhelmed given my energy limitations and health issues. How have you found a balance between self-care and helping others? And I also want to share from chat that Shelley said, Michael, a day at a time. Other panelists on advice for Michael?
I'll share that personally. I try not to overwhelm myself by engaging in opportunities or situations that I feel that I'm not equipped to participate in. In essence, I like to stay in my lane and my comfort level. There are individuals that are doing phenomenal work that I consider to be in the stratosphere of the ALS, but I am not wanting to be one of them. I am comfortable engaging in the capacity that I can successfully contribute in. And it's really a matter of managing expectations for yourself. I enjoy what I do. If I attempted to keep up with others, I would be exhausted and I would be disappointed in my efforts. So you gotta be real with yourself.
I really appreciate that response, Juan. Really thinking about what is most important to you, and because balance between self-care and helping others and balance in life in general looks so different from person to person. So finding your balance And sometimes it's through trial and error, but going back to what Justin was saying earlier about boundaries, can be really helpful in finding that sense of balance of, okay, I'm not going to do more than X number of hours a week to start. Let me see how I feel with this before I commit more time or more energy. And then you sort of get to know yourself a little bit more in terms of what that balance looks like for you. So I hope that's helpful, Michael. All right, our next question, also from chat, is I have a colleague with ALS and we have a very open communication style about how things are changing and feeling for him. We met when ALS has progressed already, and it has continued to change his ability to communicate in the last 1.5 years. We live on opposite coasts and he's a busy guy, so our connection time is almost entirely over Zoom or Slack, and most often in group settings. I often think about the different ways I can show up for him. I would love to hear about times where colleagues or friends have made you feel seen and supported. Oh, sorry, I'm going to chat. Shelley said, Dana, stay connected. Share your life. Don't make the ALS the focus of the relationship. And Chanel said in response to Michael's question earlier, it's okay to say no. Balance is the key. And Michael said, thank you, Juan. And yes, thank you. So coming back to Dana's question. Panelists, any guidance for Dana?
I have colleagues that I work with in the military and with my last job in the Salvation Army. And they have helped me by reaching out to me in various capacities, either by sharing my experience or speaking to groups of individuals in their current profession about ALS. And I even engage with college students regarding advocacy and how they can advocate for students that they will be teaching in the future. Advocacy crosses boundaries, the practices, and ability to affect the future of others positively can be applied across the board, not just with ALS or diseases in general. And so they offer opportunities to re-engage in a professional or semi-professional capacity. And so I would encourage you to look at opportunities where your friend can contribute at large, and it doesn't have to be in the field that they were in, because ALS really does open up our minds about what is valuable and important to us, and we can definitely share those beliefs and thoughts with other communities.
I was trying to think, rack my brain about what my colleagues have done. I haven't worked in a 1.5 years, but I still have colleagues who, or I guess ex-colleagues, but they're more friends that some of them will still shoot me a text and just say, hey, I've been thinking about you. How are you? Or maybe they'll shoot me a message on Facebook or Instagram, and that goes a long way. I haven't seen them since I stopped working, but every now and then they'll send me a message. Or I still have colleagues or friends from work that I hang out with that'll come over, spend a couple hours with me and just chat. That's that goes a long way for me. And I've even had, I guess the past 2 years, I've participated in like the the walk to defeat ALS that the ALS Association puts on in each state. And I still have colleagues, that I worked with who show up on walk day. And so just little stuff like that, for me has gone a long way. I know that you live on different coasts, so that may be difficult to do, but just sending him a text or just hey, thinking about you today, stuff like that, it really goes a long way.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Juan. And in chat, Chanel said, Dana, treat your friend like you always have. The means may be different, but stay in touch. And Dana shared, thanks everyone for sharing your thoughts and advice. I appreciate it. All right, y'all. I think that was actually our last question for today. And I do want to thank you all so very much for being here and asking such thoughtful questions. And thank you to our incredible panelists for being here, for opening up and really sharing such a significant part of your life with all of us. So thank you so much for that. And Teresa in chat said a hug for everyone. And I echo that sentiment, Teresa, and right back at you as well. And Shelley mentioned, please reach out. And Arlette said, thank you. Great information. Love learning from all of you. So a couple of things before we wrap for today. As Mackenzie mentioned earlier, we have a really wonderful ALS support team, and we are here to provide support to all of you. So if you want to connect with us, please reach out to us at that email that Mackenzie just posted, which is gethelp@iamals.org. I also want to share a link to our support groups. I know support groups came up quite a bit in conversation today, and just wanting that sense of connection. So if you are interested in joining a support group, every Tuesday we meet for people living with ALS. And then we have 3 different types of caregiver support groups that rotate on each Wednesday of the month as well. So you can sign up and learn more through that link that I just shared. And also, for our next Ask Me Anything, we are actually going to be continuing this conversation on finding meaning, but this time we're going to be flipping the perspective a little bit and hearing from caregivers to someone living with ALS on how they explore finding meaning and what that looks like for them. So with that, and that's going to be on December 6th. So we will be sure to share that link out with all of you as well, in case you and or your caregivers are interested in joining us for that. And just going back to chat, James said, yes, thank you to all. Lisa said, my 16-year-old heard a little and said, wow, they are sharing amazing life lessons in gratitude. Nan said, thank you, such a powerful session. And Shelley said, thank you, Blake, Aditi, and Mackenzie. Thank you, Shelley. All right, and with that, we will wrap for today. If you have any questions, again, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at gethelp@iamals.org. And we hope to see you and find time to connect with all of you soon. Thank you again to our amazing panelists. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.